We are pleased to be joined by State Senator Christine Drazan, who recently announced her run for governor for Oregon. So thanks for coming into our studio.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Senator, you ran for this office in 2022.
I did.
You lost by less than 4 points to the current governor, Tina Kotek. What's changed since that election, and what did you learn from that campaign?
Well, for Oregonians, nothing's changed, and that's a big part of why I'm running again. We had this conversation with Oregonians, and there was so much that needed to happen in our state. Homelessness, crime, schools, all of these things were a challenge in 2022 when Tina Kotek and I were running for governor. Now, 3 years later, our homeless issues are worse than they've ever been. In downtown Portland, they saw increases of 67% in their homeless populations in downtown Portland. Our housing numbers have never been lower. Just look at the metrics for affordability. I don't know how you're feeling right now about utility rates and property taxes and the price of bread at the grocery store, but everything across our state right now is getting more expensive. And those issues are a direct reflection on leadership that is not ambitious enough for the future of our state. And so I'm running for governor because I really do believe that our state deserves better. And Tina has not delivered. She does not deserve a second term as governor of the state of Oregon. And this is what elections are for, so that we can have this conversation among all of us and say, what do we want? What's our vision for the future? Who can best lead us to help us achieve that vision for our future? So I'm excited. I'm excited to be in the race. I know it's a serious moment for our state and for Oregonians themselves right now. Folks are struggling, and I am grateful to be a part of that conversation again.
The Democratic Party of Oregon said your announcement that you're running for governor makes one thing clear. They said, quote, Donald Trump is officially on the Oregon ballot. What's your response to that, and do you consider yourself aligned with the president?
I just think it's hilarious, if I'm being honest. Before I got in the race, I knew that there was only one thing that desperate people in power could do to try to hold on to power, and that's change the subject. And that's point to someone else and talk about anything but the issues that are facing Oregonians. This was the most predictable thing that's ever going to happen. And Oregonians are going to see more and more and more of the people in power saying, we're going to hold on to power at all costs. And so we're going to talk a lot about Donald Trump because he's super unpopular in Oregon. Okay, I get that. But what about homelessness? What about housing? What about our schools? I mean, we are 48th in the nation for fourth grade reading. We're 46th in the nation for fourth grade math. Mississippi is number 1. Do we feel good about that? No, I don't feel good about that. And so the Democrats, they want to talk about Donald Trump. Of course, they wish he was on the ballot in Oregon, but unfortunately for them, I'm on the ballot in Oregon, and I am experienced and competent and reasonable and ready to serve the people of this state. I've lived here my entire life, and I love Oregon. And I believe that Oregonians themselves should be able to choose the best leader for their future and not be manipulated, which is all that's happening with the Democrat Party right now in Oregon. They're trying to manipulate voters into a position where they want them to stop paying attention to what's happening on their streets. And that's actually quite pathetic.
And I understand you want to create that distinction between you and the president. At the same time, there are certain instances you'd have to work with the federal government and the White House. And certainly, President Trump has at times shined a spotlight on Oregon and Portland in particular with his attempt to deploy the National Guard there. And at times, perhaps he would say that Tina Kotek's been a thorn in his side in that because she has argued against that. What would be your message to President Trump if he were to take those similar tactics with you in the governor's seat?
I think this is really important to be clear about. I am running to be governor of the state of Oregon, to be accountable to Oregonians first. And I believe in the future of this state. And if I was governor, there would have been no cause for anyone to have a conversation about whether or not we needed to send in anybody from the federal government to our state, because I would expect and demand that our local law enforcement just enforce the law across all communities, across all neighborhoods. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the neighbors that live across from that facility, they filed a lawsuit against the city to try to get the police to act, because the police were standing back, hands off. They were observing, and they were just letting this encampment go on and on and on. They weren't engaging at all to preserve law and order in a neighborhood from June until September. And then all of a sudden you have the feds talking about Portland. That never would have happened under my administration, because I would not have allowed that community to be completely abandoned by their political leadership that was choosing, frankly, a political conversation over the quality of life for the people that had to live right there. Protest is one thing, but for months that wasn't protest, it was an encampment. And that encampment was ruining the quality of life for the people that lived there. And so, to be very clear, I absolutely will stand up for Oregonians. And in the case of the issues going on in Portland, I had personal conversations with the mayor, personal conversations with the police chief, saying, please just treat every neighborhood the same. I could not believe the fact that they were abandoning that neighborhood like it didn't matter for months. So I think the most important thing to know is that every governor across the nation always has to work well or work collaboratively when it benefits your people with the president, no matter who that president is. And I will do that. If it benefits Oregonians, absolutely. I think it's very important to work with the federal administration. Oregon is very dependent on federal money. We've seen it all over the news. Among all the states, we take in an awful lot of federal resources. And we need to continue to work with the federal government to the benefit of our people. If there's an issue, though, that it doesn't serve Oregonians, I will always stand up for Oregonians.
And that means you'd stand up against the president if it was an issue that you felt did not benefit Oregonians.
Absolutely, absolutely. I am running to be governor of the state of Oregon. I'm not running for Congress, and I'm certainly not running for a popularity contest. But I believe that Oregon is on the wrong track. There's not a lot that's going on here right now that I think is serving the people of this state. Taxation is crazy. We have got to get our hands around these issues where our tax rates are equivalent to New York City. How can that be? We cannot continue to operate this way in Oregon. Our schools have got to be better. We have got to get local control back. We've got to get some of this political agenda stuff out of our schools. We need our teachers, who are great teachers, to be able to teach reading, writing, and math, instead of filling their days with stuff that is preventing them from helping our kids succeed. You can go across every issue set, and I could talk about all of the statistics because the facts speak for themselves. Oregon right now is not on the right track. And so I'm committed to being a part of turning that around and partnering with Oregonians and being accountable to them and saying the Oregon way is better than this. Our future is brighter than this. I still believe Oregon is one of the most extraordinary states in the nation, and there is no excuse for us not to be just a magnet, number one in the nation for the best place to raise your family, start a business, grow a business, get a world-class education, go into the trades, whatever that might look like for you. Come to Oregon. We need to be that kind of state.
I want to get more into some of those economic policies and some of your discussions specifically about education. I have one more question. Oregon's sanctuary laws certainly have also been the target of Trump's ire, of President Trump's ire. Do you agree with Oregon's sanctuary policies, and would you enforce them?
We have been a sanctuary state for a really long time, and I think that there is a big distinction between whether or not Oregon works with federal officers in enforcing immigration laws or impedes that. When it comes to people that are dangerous criminals, when it comes to people that have been convicted of crime, I think that in our state, that our law enforcement should have the ability to tell federal law enforcement that someone is taken into custody that has been convicted of a crime that is not a citizen. But absolutely, Oregonians have been clear. They don't want our local law enforcement to be partnering or facilitating immigration activities. And I think that the federal folks, of course, have the mandate and the duty and authority to maintain our borders.
I'll pick up on something you had mentioned before. You want to make Oregon number one. You made a pledge to turn Oregon into the number one state for businesses, families, and school children, school-age children. What does that actually mean, to make Oregon the number one state? How would you do that?
Yeah, we have got to be more ambitious for our own futures. And so that means that we need to reduce the regulatory burden on on our businesses across our state, but also in our classrooms, in our schools. I don't know if you've talked to a school board member lately, or if they come on and talk with you in your show, but our schools are regulated to death by the Oregon Department of Education. I mean, it started in COVID, and certainly it's ramped up and it's continued since that time. Our classes are just wrapped up in regulatory requirements and reporting requirements, and it does hamper our schools. It absolutely impacts our local principal and how they manage the staffing they've got in a school. They have people dedicated to reporting requirements from an agency that don't serve students, that don't help students learn, that just, like check a box for a bureaucracy. That's got to stop. It has got to stop, this idea that the state has to dictate and mandate everything to everybody all the time, and then they need to be able to be regulated practically out of business. So the regulatory environment, and I'm talking business, but I'm also talking at an agency level, anybody that interacts with an agency right now, it feels like you have to have a permit to get a permit. That's crazy. But that's what people tell us all the time. If you want to build a pole barn, it might take 6 months for you to get that initial permit. That should not be how our system operates. Government should be there to help folks engage in economic activity. They should be there to help folks get to yes. And instead, government starts at no and makes them fight their way to yes. And that's a big part of the problem for Oregon right now. People are leaving our state for the tax environment in other places, and also for just the business climate. I mean, you probably also saw this just a couple days ago. Intel released additional layoffs. We're talking about a major employer in our state that continues to hemorrhage workers. And we have got to get very serious about figuring out what we're going to do about our economy. We have got to support economic growth. The Hospital Association just also released a statement. We're talking an awful lot lately about healthcare issues. And they said, you know what, you want to support hospitals? Best way to do it is grow our economy. We need people that are in the commercial markets. We need people here that are not exclusively on Medicaid and Medicare, for us to be able to keep the lights on too. And so that connection, we need to all make that connection. That if we believe that we need a strong social safety net, it means we need to have a strong economy. And so I'm committed to doing that. And that goes for our schools, that goes for our business environment, that goes for families. Families need to be respected in our state, and our communities need to feel safe. We need to have fewer needles on our streets and more police officers, and we need to ensure that people recognize that the laws here will be enforced and that the people who need help will get help.
The legislature passed a transportation package. I think you're familiar with it, right?
Yes, I am.
It happened down party lines, of course, in the special session in September. You've been a vocal critic of that bill, and right now an effort's in place to gather enough signatures for a referendum on that bill to send to voters. ODOT says that referendum could lead to job losses and service cuts. Do you have concerns over the consequences of essentially putting a pause potentially on that money coming to ODOT?
All of this is preventable with leadership. In the session, I had a plan, Republicans had a plan that would have balanced the budget for ODOT without tax increases. It's possible. We showed them the way. And we gave multiple proposals that would have allowed them to keep those jobs without raising taxes. And so if they feel like they have to pause what's happening at ODOT, they have alternatives even today. The governor could go to the emergency board and request funding to be able to be a bridge to when that question is answered on the ballot. And so all along, she has known that this was a likelihood because it was so opposed by Oregonians. I mean, we had, I think, thousands and thousands and thousands of people that sent in testimony in opposition to that measure. And so she could not be surprised that Oregonians are concerned about it and can't afford it right now. And so the solution for her, and I am concerned about snowplows and filling potholes, I care about that. So my proposal made sure that we got that work done without taxes. And now I have been continuing to suggest to the governor, go to the emergency board, get bridge funding. If you don't have an ending fund balance in the agency, get bridge funding so that we can let voters vote on this issue.
You think you're going to get enough signatures?
I believe that there absolutely is enough opposition to get that on the ballot. I think Oregonians should have the last word on this.
Governor Kotek issued a housing and homelessness emergency on her first day in office. She set ambitious goals that so far have mostly been unmet, mainly in regards to building homes. What do you attribute to that inability to reach those goals? And how would you create a system to facilitate more building? Because I think everyone can agree we need more building.
Yeah, I think she's just mediocre. I think she's not good at her job. I believe that there was opportunity for our state to be laser focused, especially with the declaration, especially with the emergency declaration. She had the power under that emergency declaration to clear away a regulatory burden that was really slowing housing development. She had the power with that emergency order to be able to get real-time help to the people on our streets. And she chose to declare the emergency and then do nothing. She chose to declare the emergency and then act like it wasn't an emergency. I think that she is doing the best she can, and I think that she does not have it in her to actually achieve those goals.
Do you feel like there is still an emergency, though, that would need drastic measures taken when you were to take office?
Absolutely, I believe we do need an emergency, particularly around homelessness. I believe that that's the only way you're going to save lives. We're seeing people dying on our streets slowly in front of us every single day. It's a decline of mental health. Behavioral health issues are impacting their ability to keep themselves safe. And certainly by just turning a blind eye and waiting for people to be ready to get into treatment, it's not working. It's not working. 67% more people are homeless today on the streets of Portland than when Tina took office 3 years ago. That's not good enough for any of us. That is callous. It's not compassion. And so I believe that emergency order absolutely gives the governor the authority to set aside some of these regulatory burdens and take resources from across all of these areas and really be laser focused on helping people in real time. We have to know who's on our streets. We have to be able to meet these needs by name. And if you have no idea who's out there, what their needs are, how they got there, you aren't going to be able to serve them. If it's an anonymous point in time count and all you're going to do is try to churn out public housing and you haven't solved the real core crisis, which is addiction for a lot of folks, and for those that have moved from addiction to mental health challenges, they need assistance. And so we have got to look at this much more holistically. This is not simply a building challenge. This is a people problem, and we need to treat it like these individuals have dignity. And to recognize that, we need to get them help and not just ignore them.
You mentioned before Oregon's taxes, and you compared them at one point to New York, and how you feel like that's pushed some people out of the state. What would be the change in a Drazan administration to our tax structure, and does that mean cutting taxes for everyone?
Yeah, I believe that we need to lower taxes in the state of Oregon. And how that happens, it goes through a legislative process, and it needs to have bipartisan support to get that done. I look forward to leading on that issue. And we have to look at the exodus from our state and recognize that businesses that might still have a footprint here are growing exponentially in other places. Arizona, Nevada, other states are recruiting here in Oregon and saying, I know you're anxious to grow, come our way. We want you. And here in Oregon, they have to fight their way to stay here, to stay in business here. And that is part of the problem. And the tax issue is one for Oregon families. I hear from senior citizens all the time that tell me that their property taxes now cost more than their mortgage used to cost. And they're on fixed income. And they're trying to do the math and figure out how long they can stay in their home and what will happen next. Where will they go next? That's a problem. That's a structural problem for us. Demographically, we have the lowest birth rate in the nation, so young kids aren't coming into our schools at the same rate they used to, and our populations are aging. And so if we're going to have a senior population, we need to figure out what we're going to do around taxation to make sure that they can still afford to be housed. And these are challenges that need to be bipartisan in nature for the solutions. But from my seat as leader of the state of Oregon, I am going to say that the solution here is to lower taxes, and we need to provide relief to Oregonians themselves.
I'm glad you mentioned bipartisanship, because if you were to win the governor's seat, and even let's say if there's a big red wave, I'm going to have trouble believing that the legislature turns red. you're going to have to work with Democrats to
Sure.
get things passed. Some of these issues you're talking about, there are Democrats that haven't entertained them. They haven't even, leaned into them at all. How would you have that compromise? How would you be able to pass these bipartisan laws or legislation that you're talking about with likely a lot of Democrats?
Here's the great news, and that is that I have been working in a bipartisan way for years. I mean, I was the minority leader. I've been a Republican in the legislature. For me to get anything done at all, I had to work across the aisle, and I was willing to do that where there were ready partners on the other side. There is also the benefit in the governor's office of the importance of recognizing that the governor has the power of the veto pen. And there is a level of collaboration that you can encourage and incentivize by saying, listen, I'm not going to sign this budget. I'm going to veto this budget. We can't afford it. We will not be doing business as usual. We will not be paying for everything because Oregonians cannot afford taxes that allow you to do everything for all people in the legislature. So those conversations are good and healthy, and that's how we restore balance in our state. That's how we get back to a place that people can afford to live here. And the governor's office has the authority and the power to be able to bring people to a table. So it's not just a bully pulpit. You have a position where you can actually negotiate with people because you have a shared interest in getting the problem solved.
Okay, you mentioned healthcare, and I want to combine this a little bit with affordability because healthcare is expensive, and many Oregonians are about to see healthcare premiums go up.
Yeah.
We just did a story this week on that. Some rural hospitals are really struggling. Even some urban hospitals are struggling. Some have closed. Some are on the verge of closing. Clinics are closing. How should the state manage this healthcare crisis?
Yeah, our healthcare crisis is, again, part of the challenge for how we got here. We have been regulating this industry to death. And hospitals will tell you that the mandates and the requirements that the legislature put on them, well-intentioned in some cases, handouts to special interests in others, but the mandates that we put on our healthcare system is now putting them in a position where they might need to close their doors or shut down a maternity ward. And they have been, for years now, been asking for regulatory relief so that they can balance their books and stay open. Legislators in Salem have been ignoring them. And so now we have another layer to that crisis, right? But the crisis was coming no matter what because of what Salem had been doing to our healthcare system. They want to, sometimes I talk about it like you want to be tall, thin, and rich. You don't just want one, you want all of it. And when it comes to the mandates on healthcare in Oregon, our premiums are going up because the mandates are going in. And so they are asking insurance to cover everything for all people all the time with no out-of-pocket costs. That's expensive. Those costs get spread. And they are giving our hospitals and our providers lower reimbursement rates. So we're asking them to try to figure out how to run their clinics and run their hospitals when we're not providing at a state level reimbursement for the full cost of those services. And so they're having to shift it over to the commercial markets. That drives up costs on the commercial side. So the system itself is one that is in crisis right now. And we need to listen to our providers and say, what will it take for you to stay in Oregon? What do you need to make your business run? And what can we do to better serve Oregonians themselves? Right now we are what's called a high cost, low usage state. And so our system costs a lot of money. We pay for a lot of things, but it doesn't mean that somebody has access to a primary care physician. That's crazy. I went looking for a doctor last month and couldn't find one in the town where I live. I could not find a doctor. I have insurance. I couldn't find someone that was taking new patients that took my insurance. So you just have to keep looking and keep looking and keep looking. That's not how the system is supposed to work. So we're this is an expensive system where we're paying for this extraordinary access to insurance, but if you can't get in to see a doctor, what good is that to you? So we, again, need to work with this sector, understand where these challenges are, where the problems are, and we need to reduce the regulatory burden, we need to increase reimbursement rates, and we need to stabilize this system.
I appreciate all these, the discussion of these issues that are so important to Oregonians. I want to end on one final thing, which is, I know you're going to hear this a million times and you've heard it a million times. Oregon hasn't had a Republican governor in 4 decades.
What?
Did you know that?
I had no idea.
And we've seen from recent elections how strong the Democratic Party is in this state and how many people align themselves with that party. What is your message to Democrats? Because you would have to pull some Democrats to vote for you. What is your message to Democrats who maybe have said, maybe I don't like where the Democratic Party is right now, but I haven't trusted the Republican Party? What's your message to them?
Well, it is my commitment to all Oregonians to serve them. I'm not here asking people to change their party affiliation. I'm asking people to give me the opportunity to serve them and change the future of our state in ways that respect differences. There used to be a time where we could say to each his own. And I have my values and you have your values, but we have a lot of things in common. And I believe that that is the Oregon way, that it is possible to get back to an understanding of the things that we share in common for the things that we want to achieve for ourselves and our families and our communities. And I actually think that there's a lot more of that than there are differences. Though the differences matter, right? Like there's a reason that people align how they do politically. But I also kind of want to dispel something that you mentioned. Democrats are 33% of all registered voters in the state of Oregon. That's not a juggernaut. They absolutely have won in races. But I would say the responsibility falls to me to be able to build bridges, regardless of party, to help people understand what my leadership would look like, what my values are. My values are hard work, respect, vision for the future, and more than anything else, a commitment to results, to solving problems in a way that people can look at their lives and they can say that she said she was going to do this, and that is exactly what she did. And that's the conversation that I'm having right now with Oregonians across our state. And I always think that that if we look at this election as just strictly a party conversation, that it's just, you know, like what team are you on? What jersey do you wear? That hasn't been working for us. It hasn't helped our state get better. Our state's gotten worse. Our state has not gotten better by doing the same things over and over and over again. Instead, we're in decline. And the facts don't lie. You can't run from the facts. We have an extraordinary cost burden in Oregon that isn't reflected across the nation. So it's not federal inflation. This is Oregon specific. Our taxes are Oregon specific. The challenges on our streets, the tent camping, that's Oregon. We have to repeal Tina's bill that legalized camping in public spaces. We have to. We have to lower the cost burden for Oregon families, whether or not that's by reducing the regulatory burden or lowering taxes. Those are real life improvements that serve people regardless of party. And I have been grateful to serve as a member of the legislature now. And when I go into Salem to serve, I'm serving all of my constituents, regardless of party affiliation. I do not care what your party affiliation is. I am there to fight for your needs and your family and serve you and help untangle messes. If you have a problem with an agency, I would love to be the one to help you resolve that challenge and untangle the complications of engaging with our very complex government. But that's really, this race needs to be about Oregonians themselves. It needs to be about Oregon problems. It can't just come down to party politics. If it does, we won't get out of this mess. Having single party control has not been healthy for our state. It hasn't served us. It actually hasn't achieved the goals that people in that party have stated that they want to achieve. We need to work together. And we need to recognize that we have things to contribute together that can make us stronger as a state moving forward.
She's running for governor in less than a year now.
It's going to be here before we know it.
It will. I hope we can have you back, Christine Drazan. Thank you so much.
I look forward to it. Thank you.